Hello everyone, welcome to our wine discovery case, this time focusing on Alsace in France. France is one of the largest wine producing countries in the world by volume. It was so in 2024. It was the second largest in 2025. Here in the UK, we love French wines. We see them everywhere on wine lists, in restaurants and bars. But today we're focusing particularly on a tiny, very long region situated on the northwestern part of France, right on the border with Germany. Alsace is a very picturesque wine region. If you get the chance to visit or if you've been there, you will see that the villages have all the names of the streets and the villages. They have German and French signage on them. That's because Alsace changed hands between France and Germany throughout the centuries several times. One of the things that make Alsatian wine so special is the fact that the whole wine region is situated on the slopes of the Vosges Mountains. It's a very tall set of mountains that run from south to north, from France into Germany. That set of mountains will stop most of the cold weather that comes from continental France. So if you look at a Google view, it depends on the day of Alsace, you will see to the west clouds, sometimes rain, and to the east all bright and shiny, because the Vosges Mountains will stop that cold weather from coming over and covering Alsace. That makes very much easier to ripen here white grape varieties such as Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Pinot Gris, Sylvaner, and Pinot Noir, which is the only black grape variety permitted in Alsace. Another thing that makes Alsace very, very interesting is that in Alsace alone, you will find more different types of soils than in the rest of France combined. That because throughout millennia, the Vosges Mountains collapsed on one side, exposing all the different types of soils and rocks that had been building there for millions of years, creating almost like a deck of cards of different soil types. So we will have a lot of, on the higher part of the slopes, you will have the rocky soils originating from basalt and volcanic rock. And then as you move down, where the mountain was eroded by the weather throughout millennia, you will find soils such as limestone, sandstone, and right at the bottom of the valley, the richer soils with clay and plenty of water. One thing that's super exciting about Alsatian wines is their wines are very food friendly. You will see throughout the tasting today that those wines have focused acidity or beautiful aromatic or beautiful texture, and the Pinot Noir has a bit of all of it. This discovery journey case is focused on one particular producer, Domaine Allimant-Laugner, which we have been working with for over a decade now. The domain has been there for 13 generations. Generation number 14 is now 5 years old. It started with two separate domains, the Allimants and the Laugners. They had been neighbors for a really long time. And then a couple of generations back, the Allimant girl fell in love with the Laugner boy. They ended up marrying. And then when the parents passed away, they merged the vineyards, creating Domaine Allimant-Laugner. Nicolas, the Allimant-Laugner now running the vineyard, focuses a lot on biodynamic, organic, no use of artificial chemicals. So you see that most of his wines are already certified organic or are in the process of being certified organic in the next coming vintages, because that is really the focus of Domaine Allimant-Laugner. And we're off to the first wine of the case. What the best way to start a party? than a glass of bubbles. So for the first wine of the journey, I chose Cremant d'Alsace. Cremants is a style of wine that's becoming more and more popular over the last 3 or 4 years. We have seen much more interest, much more demand for the style, for a simple reason that you will be able to taste when you open the bottle. It delivers to a quality level quite not far from champagne, but with a much more customer-friendly price. Cremant is made in the same way as champagne, which means the second fermentation that creates bubbles in the wine, that fermentation happens in the same bottle that the wine is going to be sold in. This particular Cremant, Domaine Allimant-Laugner Cremant d'Alsace Rosé, it's a rosé wine, it's a pink wine. It is one of the most popular wines at Humble Grape's portfolio. And if you haven't tasted it yet, I am going to spoil a little bit for you. It tastes like a Provençal rosé with bubbles. It tastes like summer. From 100% Pinot Noir. It is very pale in color, and it's aged in the bottle in contact with yeast, with dead yeast, for 12 months. You will see that the wine has very fine mousse-like bubbles. It has lovely aromas of red fruits and a really nice aroma of pastry, a little bit like red fruit Danish, right underneath. Very crisp, fresh, mineral, thirst-quenching, an excellent way of starting this lovely discovery journey of Alsace. Second wine of the discovery journey is a Pinot Gris. Pinot Grigio, exactly the same grape variety. Pinot Gris is how the grape is called in France. Pinot Grigio, how it's called in Italy. Throughout time, though, these two different names also came to mean two different styles. The Italian style, Pinot Grigio style, generally, it's a light-bodied wine, very fresh, fruit-forward, quite simple, very quaffable, not a very complex style of wine. The Pinot Gris style, the French style, came to mean particularly from Alsace, a richer, fuller-bodied, more aromatic, more complex style of Pinot Gris. This particular Pinot Gris that you're about to try, it has spent a little bit of time in large foodlers, which are very, very large oak barrels, in between 5 to 10,000 liters. That is to enhance and enrich the texture of this wine. You will see now in your glass that the wine has a beautiful golden color, golden hue to it. On the palate, you will feel that the wine is very rich. It fills your palate. It's very smooth and round, with lovely notes of peach, ripe red apple, apricots, a nice orange zestiness that surrounds the wine. And the wine is not particularly acidic, but it's very, very rich, with a very, very long finish. It's a very incredible style of Pinot Gris. It is Domaine Allimant-Laugner Pinot Gris is very typical of what Pinot Gris from Alsace will taste like. And yes, I hope you enjoy it. Third wine of your discovery journey through Alsace, and I chose another of the famous white grape varieties of Alsace. We've just tried Pinot Gris, and now we're going into Gewürztraminer. Gewürztraminer is a very particular grape variety because of certain aromatics that are found on the skin of Gewürztraminer, on the underlying layer of cells that are right beneath the skin of the grape variety, that will be translated and will perfume, it will spice the wine. Alsatian styles of Gewürztraminer tend to be naturally a little bit on the off-dry side, so this isn't a dry wine. You will notice as you try the wine that there's a little bit of sugar left there. The sugar is left from fermentation. In terms of color, it also has a beautiful golden color, like the Pinot Gris we've just tried. Also a very rich wine. It fills your palate with very highly recognizable aromas of, and you can pick out a Gewürztraminer out of a blind tasting because of these aromas. Aromas of rose petals, lychee, Turkish delight, subtle hint of mango, and like Pinot Gris, a lovely note of orange zest. Because of the aromatics in this wine and a little bit of sweetness left, this wine pairs really well with spicy food. Think here South Asian spices or South Asian dishes will pair really well. The fact that this wine is served cold and has a little bit of sweetness offsets the heat of the dish quite beautifully. I hope you enjoy it. So we are now at wine number 4 of the journey. And again, I chose another of the famous white grape varieties of Alsace, which is Riesling. We'll be tasting 2 different Rieslings in this journey. One will be from a Grand Cru, so it'll be quite interesting for you to try side by side and see why Grand Cru wines tend to demand a little bit more in terms of price. This particular Riesling, also certified organic, as the majority of the wines in this case. It is very different from the 2 previous wines. First thing you notice, not just in terms of aromatics or in terms of body, this wine is much leaner. It is the acidity. Alsatian Rieslings have a very focused acidity to them, which makes the wine feel very fresh and supple. That acidity makes this wine extremely food friendly, pairing with anything from cream cheeses to pork dishes. It will pair really, really well. Because this Riesling vineyard is planted on limestone soils, you will feel when you taste the wine that it has a lovely underlying note of wet stones, wet rocks that comes from Rieslings that have been grown on limestone soils. Besides that, this Riesling has a very refreshing aroma of lime zest, green pineapple, florals of white flowers, and a really, really long finish. 5th wine of the case, and we are still with Riesling as the previous wine, and I hope you saved some of the previous Riesling so you can taste them side by side. This Riesling comes from a different vineyard, a Grand Cru vineyard. Grand Cru in French means great growth. Those designations are reserved for the very special vineyards that have a history of producing high quality grapes, therefore high quality wines. This particular Grand Cru is called Pilatenberg. In Alsace, the Grand Cru Pilatenberg, you will find not just Riesling, but a Gewürztraminer coming out of this cru as well. The soil is almost exclusively made of limestone. It's a very poor soil with a perfect exposure to sunlight. So Riesling can ripe quite nicely here. But because the soils are very poor, the vines will produce a much smaller crop of Riesling grapes with a much more concentrated flavor. So you will see that the key difference between the Pilatenberg Riesling that you're about to taste and the Riesling that you've tasted before is the concentration of flavors. In Pilatenberg, the wine feels more perfumed. It will almost jump out of the glass at you. The note of wet stones and wet rocks that we discussed in the previous Riesling is much more pronounced here in this Riesling. The flavors also feel much more concentrated on the palate. And you will notice that those lovely aromas and flavors of wet rocks, lime zest, green pineapple, floral notes. This wine is starting to show a little bit of petrol, that a reason they spend time in bottle will. All of those aromas, they are very linear. They will fill your palate from the beginning all the way to the end, and will stay on the palate for a long time. So this Riesling has a very long finish. And of course, to close this discovery journey through Alsace, I chose a red wine. The only black grape variety allowed in Alsace is Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir, it came from Burgundy, from much further south in France. It was transplanted here. About a century ago, Pinot Noir almost disappeared from Alsace. The focus was exclusively on white wine production and sparkling wine production. But then throughout the last century, we saw sparkling wine production growing and red wine production growing. Possibly, to be a little bit polemic here, because of climate change, things are becoming warmer in Alsace, which means it becomes easier to ripen black grape varieties there, and Pinot Noir will do quite well here. Pinot Noir, the name means black cone because it looks, the bunch of grapes look like a little black cone, pine cone. Pinot Noir produces wines that are quite fragrant, very perfumed, is still subtle, is still elegant, and that are also very food friendly. You will have noticed if you already poured this Pinot Noir that it is quite light in color. It's not a particularly deeply colored wine. On the palate, it has lovely notes of crunchy red fruit, cherries, cranberries, strawberries when they are almost fully ripe, very fine chalk-like tannins. There aren't a lot of tannins in this wine, but the wines are very fine and chalk-like. Like the Pre-Lattenberg Riesling, this wine has a quite long finish. And if you approach your nose to the glass very slowly, you will get a really subtle note of violets, which is one of the hallmarks of Pinot Noirs that are grown in cooler climate. I hope you enjoyed this journey through Alsace, and I look forward to seeing you in our next wine discovery journey.